right now, at this exact moment, there are millions of people across Southeast Asia who are practicing this really strict daily ritual.
Yeah, millions of people.
And it's this foundational rule of behavior, It dictates how they structure their entire day, how they interact with their communities, and specifically how they consume their food.
Exactly.
And I think, well, if you're looking at this ancient tradition from the outside, you might just assume it was born from some moment of, I don't know, profound, quiet enlightenment on a mountaintop.
Right, like some majestic, peaceful origin.
Yeah, you'd imagine this solemn boardroom of spiritual elders proactively engineering human behavior,
Yeah.
drafting up this pristine policy, and then just handing it down to the masses.
But that's really the enduring myth of how monumental rules are created, isn't it?
Oh, totally.
We prefer our history to be, clean, authoritative,
Yeah.
devoid of any messy human context.
Which it almost never is.
Right. When you actually peel back the layers of ancient history, particularly the history of spiritual and communal living, that pristine illusion completely shatters.
It shatters into a million pieces because the reality behind this massive 2,500-year-old unbroken chain of human behavior, it isn't a story of quiet meditation at all.
Not even close.
It's the story of a scandal.
A pretty major scandal.
Yeah. It's the story of a group of guys who essentially, well, they snuck out to a loud, chaotic mountain festival. They got treated like absolute royalty by the crowd, ate way too much late-night takeout, and then accidentally woke up the wrong people when they got back home.
It is the absolute definition of building the airplane while you are flying it.
I love that way of putting it.
Because we were looking at a landscape of human behavior that is highly reactive.
Mhm.
The rules that endure the longest, they often don't come from abstract philosophy.
No, they come from mistakes.
Exactly. They are forged in the fires of immediate, unexpected cultural friction.
And that is exactly what we are unpacking today on this deep dive. We are taking you on a journey to uncover the origin story behind why Buddhist monks and novices do not consume food after noon.
It's a fascinating rule.
It really is. We're going to explore the specific historical, psychological, and honestly, surprisingly modern socioeconomic reasons for this practice.
And we have an incredible stack of source material guiding us today.
Yes, we do. So we are pulling our insights directly from excerpts detailing the Tipitaka, specifically a massive division within it known as the Vinaya Pitaka.
Which is essentially the foundational code of monastic discipline.
Right. And the sourcing here is paramount, right? Because we aren't just, relying on oral folklore or some loose internet interpretations.
No, we are looking at highly authoritative, meticulously preserved texts.
Can you break down exactly where this is coming from?
Sure. So the specific details we are exploring are drawn from the Thai Tipitaka Volume 2.
Okay.
And that's published by leading institutions like Mahachulang Vidyalaya University and Mahamakut Buddhist University.
Heavy hitters in terms of scholarship.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to ensure a completely balanced understanding, we've also integrated cross-referenced international and English sources.
Like the Pali Text Society?
Yes, the Pali Text Society, Sutta Central, and Dhammatalks.org. These organizations translate these texts directly from the original ancient Pali language.
So we have the receipts. We are taking these ancient texts, translated directly from Pali, and we're going to translate them again into the mechanics of everyday life.
Because you really can't let the ancient terminology fool you.
No, definitely not. I want to warn you right now, this isn't just some dry historical account of a dietary restriction.
Far from it.
It is a brilliant case study in early public relations. It is a masterclass in crisis management. And above all, it's this incredibly deep look into the psychology of moderation.
And the stakes here were incredibly high. I mean, this single rule, born out of this festival scandal, it fundamentally shaped the trajectory of an entire spiritual movement.
It dictated the exact boundaries, right?
Right. The boundaries of how an enclosed ascetic monastic community was allowed to interact with the general public.
Which is a huge deal.
It was. As we'll see, without this real-time calculation, the entire socioeconomic survival of this ancient monastic system was genuinely at risk of collapsing.
Wow. So it is the ultimate origin story. If you have ever seen photos or documentaries of Buddhist monks walking silently in their robes in the early morning collecting alms, you are looking at the direct, unbroken result of the very human, very messy scandal we are about to discuss.
It all traces back to this one event.
So let's set the stage. Because before we can even begin to understand the mechanics of the rule itself, we have to travel back to the exact historical catalyst that forced Gautama Buddha to step in and create it.
We need to leave the abstract realm of, ancient traditions.
Right, and zoom all the way in on a highly specific electric scene. So paint the picture for us. Where does this all kick off?
So we find ourselves in the ancient city of Rajagaha, specifically at a monastic residence known as Veluvana, where the Buddha is currently residing.
And what's the vibe of this city?
Well, to understand the context, you have to realize that ancient Rajagaha was not some sleepy, quiet little village.
Right, it wasn't just a few huts in the woods.
No, it was a thriving, bustling urban center. It was a hub of commerce, culture, and political power.
Like a major metropolis of its time.
Exactly. And on the specific day our sources describe, the energy in the city is at an absolute fever pitch
Why is that?
because there is a massive mountain festival taking place.
A mountain festival in a major ancient city, so we aren't talking about a quiet gathering.
No, we are talking about massive crowds, music, performers, vendors.
And an overwhelming amount of food, I'm guessing?
Oh, absolutely. A staggering amount of food.
The sensory overload must have been intense, especially if you consider the contrast between the loud, vibrant city and the quiet, disciplined environment of the Vulavana monastery.
And that contrast is exactly what sets the plot in motion.
Okay, so what happens?
Well, within the monastic community of Veluvana, there is a specific group of 17 monks.
17 of them.
Yeah. The ancient texts identify them collectively as the Satara.
The Satara Savajya. Got it.
And these 17 monks make a very fateful decision. They decide they're going to leave the quiet confines of the temple and venture down into the heart of the city.
To attend this massive mountain festival.
Exactly.
Just pause and imagine the visual of that for a second. 17 monks, dressed in their distinct ascetic robes, descending into the chaos of a loud, secular celebration.
They would have been instantly recognizable.
Right. They're essentially public figures. They're walking symbols of spiritual discipline, voluntarily stepping into a massive street party. I have to imagine they stood out immediately.
Oh, they did.
Mhm.
And their arrival triggers a massive reaction from the local villagers.
But not a bad reaction, right?
No, not at all. But to truly understand this story, we have to deeply analyze the nature of that reaction because the texts are very clear. The villagers were not hostile.
They weren't like, hey, what are you doing crashing our party?
Exactly. They weren't annoyed that these ascetics were there. Quite the opposite, actually. The lay people see these monks and are filled with profound faith and just overwhelming enthusiasm.
Which totally makes sense when you understand the cultural dynamics of the time, you know?
Right.
In this ancient society, offering support to spiritual seekers was a primary way for everyday working people to generate merit.
Yes, it was a deeply ingrained religious joy.
So seeing 17 monks walk into their festival wasn't seen as an intrusion. It was seen as this incredible, unexpected opportunity to practice generosity.
That cultural context is so vital. The villagers are overjoyed that the monks have graced their civic event
And how do they show that joy?
through an avalanche of hospitality.
Mm.
The sources detail exactly what happens next, and it's pretty wild.
Let's hear it.
The villagers immediately spring into action. They bathe the monks.
They bathe them.
They apply fragrant perfumes to them. And then they sit them down and feed them an absolute feast right there in the middle of the festival.
It's the ultimate VIP treatment.
Truly.
But it's also a complete sensory shock. I mean, think about it. These are men who have dedicated their lives to asceticism, right? To withdrawing from worldly pleasures.
Yeah, that's the whole point of the robes.
And suddenly they are bathed, smelling like expensive festival perfumes, and eating a massive feast surrounded by music and crowds.
It's an outpouring of pure generosity, but it completely envelops them.
It envelops them entirely. And the generosity doesn't even end when the feast is over, does it?
No, it doesn't. As the festival begins to wind down, or perhaps as the monks finally decide it is time to return to the monastery, the villagers refuse to let them leave empty-handed.
They're still riding this high of faith and enthusiasm.
Exactly. So they pack up massive amounts of extra food. They give the 17 monks what is essentially a massive haul of ancient takeout to carry back to Veluvana.
So picture this. The 17 Satara monks are walking back up to the temple. They are covered in perfume, completely stuffed from a feast, and carrying bags of extra festival food.
It's quite the scene.
It really is. They arrive back at the monastery, and they do what, honestly, any group of friends would do when they score an unexpected bounty of great food.
They want to share it.
Yeah. They seek out another specific group of monks within the temple. a group identified in the texts as the Chabagia.
Yes, the Chabagia. They are offered this leftover festival food.
But this is where the cultural friction really ignites, doesn't it?
It does, because the Chabagia do not just blindly accept the food and start eating.
They don't just say, awesome, thanks, guys.
No. They look at the food, they look at the 17 perfumed monks, and they start asking some very pointed questions.
They investigate the provenance of this massive haul.
Exactly. They ask the Sarasavagia, where exactly did you get all this food?
They want to know the chain of custody.
Yes, and the 17 monks are completely honest about it.
They have nothing to hide.
Right. They say, we went down to the mountain festival. The villagers loved us, and they gave us all this food.
But as soon as they say that, the Chabagia put two and two together.
You do. They know the timeline of the festival. They know what time it is currently.
And they realize a major line has been crossed.
They realize the food is being offered and consumed at what the ancient Pali texts define as vikala.
Vikala. And the translation of that is the wrong time, correct?
Yes, exactly. The concept of the wrong time. The Chabagia press the 17 monks on this immediately.
They call them out.
They ask point blank, are you eating food at the wrong time?
And what do the 17 monks say?
Well, the Sadharasavagia, perhaps not fully grasping the severity of their actions yet, just admit to it. They say, yes, we are.
The dynamic here is so incredibly relatable. We talked earlier about this feeling like a modern college dorm scenario, and the parallels really are striking if you look at the underlying mechanics of community living.
The human element doesn't change much over 2,500 years.
It really doesn't. You have one group, the 17 monks, who go out, get swept up in the energy of an event, and bring the party back home in the form of late-night food.
Right.
They wake up their peers down the hall expecting to be heroes for bringing snacks. But the peers, the Chabagia, look at the clock, look at the state of their friends, and instantly recognize that the foundational rules of the house are being violated.
I don't say thank you.
No. They act like the strict resident advisor and they bust them.
The reaction from the Chabagia is immediate, severe, and highly vocal.
They don't just quietly decline the food.
Not at all. The texts say they, along with other monks who quickly hear the commotion, strongly and loudly criticize the 17 monks.
So it turns into a whole thing.
A huge thing. The monastery erupts into an uproar over this flagrant consumption of food at an inappropriate hour.
But, if we pause right here, this intense reaction from the Chabagia almost seems like an overreaction if you only look at the surface details.
How do you mean?
Well, think about it from the perspective of an outside observer. The villagers at the festival weren't acting out of malice. They were acting out of pure, beautiful faith.
Absolute true.
The food wasn't stolen, it was freely and joyfully given. And the 17 monks didn't demand the food, they just accepted an offering.
There is no evil intent anywhere in this chain of events.
Exactly. So why does the time on the clock matter so much? Why are the Chabagia so deeply offended by the consumption of freely given food?
That is the crucial pivot point of this entire historical event. It really requires us to shift our perspective away from the innocent intentions of the individuals and look at the structural integrity of the community as a whole.
Okay, lay that out for me.
Well, you are completely right that there was no malice. The conflict here is entirely born from a profound clash between enthusiastic, unchecked lay behavior and the strict requirements of monastic discipline.
So the generosity is actually the problem.
In a way, yes. The Chabagia recognized something fundamental that the 17 monks had completely allowed themselves to forget in the heat of the festival.
Which was?
The lethal danger of unchecked indulgence, even when that indulgence is wrapped in the guise of religious generosity.
So just because a layperson freely offers you a luxury doesn't mean your vows allow you to accept it.
Precisely.
The boundary has to be maintained by the receiver, not just the giver.
Yes. If the monastic community sets a precedent where monks can wander into any secular festival, allow themselves to be bathed and perfumed like nobility, and feast at all hours of the day and night simply because the villagers are happy to provide it,
The whole thing falls apart.
the fundamental identity of the monastic life dissolves. They cease to be ascetic truth seekers and quietly transition into becoming privileged, dependent festival goers.
Wow.
The Chabagia weren't just being petty about a late-night snack. They recognized a behavioral slide that threatened the core meaning of what it meant to wear those robes.
So the food was just the physical evidence of a much deeper, more dangerous shift in behavior.
Exactly.
It was proof that the festive environment had completely overridden their internal discipline. And that realization elevates this from a minor disagreement over leftovers into a full-blown existential crisis for the institution.
Which is exactly why the incident couldn't be handled quietly among peers.
It had to go up the chain of command.
Right. The scandal becomes so intense that it is escalated to the highest possible authority. It is reported directly to the Buddha.
The scandal hits the leader's desk, and this forces a massive institutional response.
It changes everything.
We move away from the specific actions of these 17 monks and transition into witnessing how a foundational leader handles a major crisis of public relations.
And that term public relations is very accurate here.
I use it very deliberately because the Buddha's response is a masterclass in optics.
It really is.
When the Buddha calls the 17 monks to account, he obviously reprimands them. But it's the underlying rationale for the reprimand that completely upends how we usually think about ancient spiritual leadership.
The rationale is incredibly revealing.
What does he actually say to them?
When he addresses the Sarasavagya, he doesn't primarily focus on the mystical or esoteric damage they've done to their souls.
Which is what you'd expect, right?
Completely. But remember, the strict codified law against eating after noon hadn't been formally written into absolute stone yet. This event is what causes it to be written.
So he has to explain the logic first.
Yes, he has to establish the philosophical and practical grounding for why their behavior was so incredibly damaging to the community.
He has to explain the why before he issues the what. What is the exact reasoning he gives them, according to the source texts?
The Vinaya Pitaka records his reasoning very clearly. He tells the monks that their actions, and this is a direct translation, do not create faith in non-believers and do not increase the faith of those who already believe.
Do not create faith in non-believers and do not increase the faith of those who already believe.
That's the quote.
That statement is staggering. It is 100% focused on external perception.
It's entirely about the brand and the public image of the monastic order.
Which is wild. If I try to picture an ancient, enlightened sage dealing with wayward monks, I assume the lecture is going to be about internal purity.
Right, about bad karma or clouding the mind.
Exactly. I assume he's going to say that eating late clouds the mind during meditation, or disrupts the flow of internal energy, or violates a cosmic law.
But he doesn't go there first.
Instead, the Buddha acts as a pragmatic crisis manager. He looks at them and essentially says, "Do you have any idea how bad this makes us look to the public?"
It feels startlingly modern, but it reflects a profound, unyielding institutional awareness.
Why was the public image so critical at that specific moment in history?
Well, to understand why he focused on optics, you have to understand the extreme socioeconomic reality of this early monastic community.
Okay, break that down for us.
This wasn't a self-sustaining commune. The monks did not farm their own land.
Right.
They did not hold paying jobs in the city. They did not have an independent, heavily funded treasury backing them up.
They relied entirely on donations.
The literal, physical survival of this community, their daily caloric intake, the cloth for their robes, the roofs over their heads, depended entirely and exclusively on the respect, the faith, and the ongoing voluntary charity of the lay people in cities like Rajagaha.
So the villagers are the only lifeline.
The only one.
If the villagers decide the monks aren't worth supporting, the monastery literally starves.
Exactly. The Buddha understood that the ecosystem was incredibly fragile.
One bad PR move could ruin them.
Right. If the non-believers in the city see a group of monks acting like everyday frat boys attending parties, smelling of expensive perfumes, carrying takeout boxes, and feasting late into the night, they will never, ever develop faith in the spiritual authority of the institution.
They will just see another group of indulgent men. Right. I mean, if the monks act exactly like the secular citizens, why should the secular citizens revere them?
They wouldn't have any reason to.
Why should a hardworking farmer give up a portion of his hard-earned crop to feed a guy who was just partying at the mountain festival the night before?
They wouldn't. And the Buddha took it a step further. He pointed out that even the believers, even the enthusiastic villagers who actually gave them the food at the festival, might eventually experience a crisis of faith.
Wait, really? Even the ones who gave them the food?
Yes, because in the heat of the moment, the villagers were thrilled to offer the feast.
Sure, it's exciting.
But over time, if they continually see the monks eagerly indulging in every sensory pleasure offered to them without any restraint, their deep respect for the ascetic discipline of the order will erode.
Ah, that makes perfect sense.
The Buddha realized that the performance of spiritual discipline, the optics of restraint, is just as crucial to the survival of the community as the internal practice of it.
So, to protect the community from its own human nature and to permanently safeguard its standing in the wider society, the Buddha realizes a lecture isn't enough.
A lecture won't stick.
He has to take definitive structural action. The reprimand evolves into an official decree.
Yes. This inciting incident at the mountain festival is the direct catalyst for a formal, codified rule.
And this rule is still on the books today.
Very much so. It is recorded and preserved as Rule 37 of the Pasittiya, found within the Mahavibhanga section of the Vinaya Pitaka.
Rule 37. Let's dig into the actual mechanics of this decree, because the source material provides us with the original Pali chant, right?
Yes, it does.
A phrase that has been memorized, recited, and studied for thousands of years. What is the ancient phrasing of this law?
The original Pali phrasing is Yopana bikuvikale kadya genya, vabojanya vakadya, vabunjeya vapachitya.
Wow. And when the scholars at Mahachulalongkornburn Rajabali University or the Pali Text Society translate that exact phrase into English, what is the direct meaning?
The translation provided is, any monk who chews or eats food at the wrong time commits a pasitya offense.
Any monk who chews or eats food at the wrong time commits a pasitya offense.
That's the law.
We know that the wrong time is the translation of that crucial word vikala, but the consequence is what really grounds this rule. Commits a pasitya offense.
Right.
If we are looking at the legal framework of this ancient community, what exactly is a pasitya? Like, what happens to a monk who breaks this rule?
Well, in the vast, complex monastic code of the Vinaya, offenses are carefully graded by their severity. It's a very sophisticated legal system.
So there are levels to it.
Yes. At the absolute top, you have parajika offenses.
What are those?
These are the unforgivable acts, like murder, theft, or breaking the vow of celibacy. Committing a parajika results in immediate, permanent expulsion from the monastic order.
You're out. Done.
Exactly. Now, a pasitya offense is a step down from that, but it's still considered a very serious breach of monastic discipline.
So they aren't getting kicked out for eating late.
No, crucially, it is an offense that requires formal confession. It is designed to be rehabilitative rather than eternally punitive.
So it's an accountability mechanism.
Exactly.
If a monk yields to hunger and eats after the allowed time, they aren't kicked out of the monastery and left to starve. But they also aren't allowed to just quietly feel guilty about it in their room.
They have to face the music.
They have to face the community.
Precisely. If a monk breaks Rule 37, they are required to approach another monk, or sometimes the wider community, and formally confess the transgression out loud.
They have to say it out loud.
They have to openly admit that their discipline failed. And this process clears the conscience of the individual. But more importantly, it reinforces the standard of the community.
It brings it out of the shadows.
It brings the failure into the light, preventing a culture of secret shame and hidden indulgences from taking root.
It's brilliant psychological design. You mess up, you own it publicly, you reset your intentions, and you move forward.
It keeps the community honest.
But, if you are going to institute a rule that applies to hundreds, eventually thousands of monks, and you are going to hold them accountable through the intense psychological pressure of public confession.
You need to be specific.
You cannot have any gray areas. The phrase, the wrong time, is inherently subjective.
Very subjective.
If I'm designing a legal code, I know that my definition of a wrong time for a meal might be 11:00 p.m. Someone else's might be 3:00 p.m. You can't enforce a law based on a subjective feeling.
And the compilers of the ancient texts were acutely aware of this. A rule without an objective boundary is just a suggestion.
Right.
So they immediately transitioned from the philosophical decree into outlining the strict day-to-day mechanical parameters of the law. They had to define the boundaries of the clock and the boundaries of the menu with absolute precision.
This is where we get into the heavy logistics, because this is fascinating.
The logistics are incredibly detailed.
If the Buddha decrees that eating at Vikala, the wrong time, is an offense requiring confession, how did this ancient society, operating without digital watches or smartphones, definitively define the clock?
They had to use nature.
When exactly does the right time end and the wrong time begin?
The definition of Vikala is established strictly and unequivocally as the period starting precisely from noon and lasting until the dawn of the following day.
From noon until dawn. So the window for eating is entirely front-loaded into the morning.
Entirely.
The right time begins the moment the sun comes up and ends the second the sun hits its absolute peak in the sky. After noon, the eating window slams shut for roughly 18 hours until the sun rises again.
That is the fast.
But how did they measure noon accurately enough to enforce a confession-level offense?
In the ancient agrarian world, timekeeping was intimately tied to the observation of the sun.
Like using sundials.
Exactly. Monasteries and villages utilize sundials, or more simply, they observe the shadows cast by buildings or specific markers.
Oh, that makes sense.
When a vertical stick or a pillar cast its shortest possible shadow, or no shadow at all depending on the latitude and time of year, that was solar noon.
It was undeniable.
It was an objective, observable astronomical event that everyone in the community could agree upon. The moment the sun began its descent, the threshold was crossed. The Kala had begun.
So the clock is completely binary. Before the shadow lengthens, eating is permissible. After the shadow lengthens, eating is a Pisidia offense.
It's that simple.
But establishing the clock is only half the battle. You also have to define the menu.
Right. What actually counts as food?
Because the definition of food can be just as slippery as the definition of time. Did they leave the interpretation of what constitutes a meal up to the individual monks?
Not at all. The Vinaya Pitaka leaves almost nothing to the imagination.
They wrote it all down.
The texts are incredibly specific about what materials constitute a violation of the fast. They outline 5 main categories of food.
Okay, what are they?
If a monk is found consuming any item from these 5 categories after the sun has passed its zenith, they are in direct violation of Rule 37.
Let's examine this ancient menu. What are the 5 main foods that trigger the offense?
The list is highly indicative of the ancient Indian agrarian economy.
Which makes sense.
First, cooked rice.
Okay.
Second, sweets or snacks.
Right.
Third, roasted flour.
Roasted flour, okay.
Fourth, fish.
Mhm.
And fifth, meat.
Cooked rice, sweets and snacks, roasted flour, fish, and meat.
Those are the 5.
If we analyze that list from a purely nutritional and economic standpoint, it covers all the major caloric bases of that era.
It absolutely does.
You have your heavy staple carbohydrates in the cooked rice and the roasted flour. You have your dense indulgent sugars in the sweets and snacks. And you have your heavy premium proteins in the fish and the meat.
They covered every macro.
These aren't light refreshments. These are the foundational building blocks of a substantial, satisfying human diet.
Exactly. These 5 categories represent the foods that you eat to achieve satiety. They're the foods that require significant agricultural labor to produce and significant physiological energy to digest.
So the rule is crystal clear.
Utilizing these heavy, staple calories after noon is strictly forbidden.
But, whenever we look at rigid historical rules, we have to account for the reality of the human body.
Biology always comes into play.
Monks are human beings. They get sick, they experience exhaustion, they suffer from the elements.
That's a very harsh world.
Exactly. A completely unbending rule that dictates a person can ingest absolutely 0 calories for 18 hours a day, every single day, regardless of their physical condition. Well, that could easily become lethal.
Very quickly.
Especially in an ancient world where dysentery, malaria, and severe infections were constant threats.
It was a matter of life and death.
If the Buddha instituted this rule out of a profound institutional awareness, was he really willing to let his monks starve or collapse from illness just to maintain the public optics of fasting?
This is where we see the profound depth and the inherent compassion of the Vinaya legal system.
So there was a workaround.
Yes, the system is engineered to be incredibly strict, yes, but it is explicitly not designed to be a suicide pact. It is designed with a deep, pragmatic understanding of human physiology.
How so?
The text explicitly outlines a series of vital exceptions to the fasting rule. It allows for certain specific items to be consumed after noon, but only under strict conditions.
What are the conditions?
They can only be taken for necessary reasons, specifically for illness, physical weakness, or medical treatment.
So there is a built-in medical safety valve.
Exactly.
If a monk is genuinely ill or physically deteriorating, they aren't forced to just white-knuckle their way through an 18-hour fast.
They are allowed to treat their body.
What are the specific items that the ancient texts classify as allowable medicine during the Vikala period?
The sources list 5 specific allowable exceptions for an ailing monk.
Okay, let's hear the list.
They are medicine, which would encompass various ancient herbal concoctions, fruit juice, honey, butter, and sugar.
Okay, let's break down that list because it is fascinating from a biological perspective.
It really is.
Medicine and fruit juice make intuitive sense. Herbal remedies treat the ailment, and fruit juice provides vital hydration and a small amount of vitamins.
Right, that's pretty standard.
But honey, butter, and sugar.
Right.
If I'm looking at those 3 items today, I classify them as pure indulgences.
You think of them as berserk.
Yeah. They are baking ingredients, but in the context of ancient medicine, they serve a very different function, don't they?
They serve a critical, life-saving function. If we connect this list to the realities of ancient medicine and human biology, honey, butter, specifically clarified butter or ghee and sugar, were the most potent, rapidly absorbable forms of dense caloric energy available in that society.
Oh, wow.
Think about the physiology of a severe illness. If a monk is suffering from a severe intestinal illness, or a raging fever, or profound physical exhaustion from traveling on foot,
Their digestive system is completely compromised.
exactly.
Yeah.
They physically cannot process a heavy bowl of cooked meat or dense roasted flour.
Yeah.
Their body doesn't have the energy to break those complex foods down.
They need immediate, frictionless energy.
Precisely. Honey and sugar provide an immediate spike of pure glucose that requires almost zero digestive effort.
It just goes straight into the bloodstream?
Yes. And butter provides an incredibly dense, soothing source of fat and calories.
Mm.
In an era long before intravenous glucose drips or modern electrolyte solutions, allowing a sick monk to consume honey or butter was the ancient equivalent of putting them on an IV drip.
That is such a great analogy.
It had provided the absolute maximum amount of sustaining energy with the absolute minimum amount of digestive strain.
It is an incredible display of pragmatic balance. The structural rule is unbending when it comes to discipline and maintaining the optics of the community. No rice, no meat, no recreational feasting afternoon.
But it's not blind to human suffering.
Right. The very second a monk's physical well-being is legitimately threatened, the rule bends just enough to allow these high-density energy sources to keep them alive.
It's beautifully designed.
You know, when you lay out the exact mechanics of this system, an eating window strictly from dawn to noon, followed by an 18-hour fasting window, but with a highly specific, curated list of allowable clear liquids and rapid energy sources if necessary.
Does it sound familiar?
It sounds identical to a conversation you could hear on any health and wellness platform right now.
The parallels to modern dietary science are striking, aren't they?
It is exactly what millions of people are doing right now with intermittent fasting, specifically the 16.8 method.
Where you restrict eating to an 8-hour window.
Yes, people restrict all their eating to an 8-hour window and fast for the remaining 16 hours. We treat this like it's a cutting-edge breakthrough in biohacking.
Like we just discovered it.
Exactly. Silicon Valley executives, elite athletes, and health influencers constantly preach about the metabolic benefits of restricted eating windows.
And they have their own strict lists of what's allowed.
Oh, the debates are endless. Modern fasters constantly argue over specific lists of what is allowed during the fast without breaking it. Black coffee, certain teas, specific zero-calorie electrolytes.
It's the exact same concept.
What we are looking at in the Vinaya Pitaka is a massive, community-wide intermittent fasting protocol that was meticulously codified over 2 millennia before it ever became a trendy topic.
It really is.
It proves that a deep, functional understanding of the human body's digestive cycles isn't an entirely modern invention.
It is a brilliant way to conceptualize the physical mechanics of the rule. But this is where the ancient tradition diverges significantly from modern biohacking.
How so?
Well, while a modern executive might practice intermittent fasting to optimize their metabolic rate, lose weight, or increase their longevity, the ancient texts outline a much deeper, multifaceted, and communal reasoning for why this system was put into place.
Ah, so the physical benefit is just a side effect.
Essentially, yes. We have established the what, the clock, the menu, and the exceptions. Now we must dig into the deeper why. Because a rule does not survive continuously for 2,500 years just because it helps with digestion.
No, it needs to be rooted in something bigger.
It survives because it acts as a load-bearing pillar for an entire way of life.
Which brings us to the core philosophy behind the mechanics. The source texts don't just give the rule, they explain the architecture supporting it.
They break down the reasoning very clearly.
The ancient texts outline 4 main reasons, 4 foundational pillars for the establishment and strict maintenance of this fasting rule.
Yes, 4 pillars.
Let's deeply analyze these 4 pillars because they represent a fascinating intersection of psychology, biology, and ancient economics.
A very holistic approach.
So if I'm a young monk in ancient Rajagaha and I'm staring at the sun passing its zenith, feeling my stomach rumble, what is the first philosophical reason I'm taught for why I must endure this hunger?
The first reason outlined in the texts is to reduce the attachment to taste.
Reduce the attachment to taste.
Yes. The foundational concept here is retraining the mind to eat strictly for sustenance rather than eating for sensory pleasure.
I want to really explore the psychology of this because eating is arguably the most fundamental joy of human existence.
It is deeply wired into us.
Our biology practically demands that we enjoy food. The pleasure response is an evolutionary mechanism to ensure we don't starve.
We are built to seek out calories and enjoy them.
Right. So if the goal is to reduce a monk's attachment to the pleasure of food, doesn't restricting their eating window actually risk doing the exact opposite?
That's a very common question.
I mean, if I know I can only eat for a few hours in the morning and then I have to starve for 18 hours, I feel like I would spend my entire afternoon and evening obsessing over how incredible my breakfast is going to taste the next day.
You'd just be daydreaming about rice.
Yeah. Doesn't extreme restriction accidentally forge a deeper obsession?
It is a highly intuitive counterargument, and it's a struggle that many novice monks likely faced and still face today. But to understand the genius of this first pillar, you have to remember the exact catalyst for the rule.
The mountain festival.
Exactly, the mountain festival. Think about how the 17 monks were behaving. They were surrounded by abundance, eating late into the night, sampling this and that, enjoying the perfumes and the music.
They were grazing?
Yes. When human beings have unfettered 247 access to food, eating ceases to be about physical survival. It morphs into entertainment.
Oh, that is so true.
We eat to soothe boredom, to seek emotional comfort, or simply to indulge our senses. We create a continuous low-level addiction to the stimulation of taste.
We snack just because the food is there, not because the body requires fuel.
Exactly. By violently severing that constant access, the rule forces a psychological reset.
It breaks the cycle.
It does. Yes, a novice might initially obsess over tomorrow's breakfast.
Yeah.
But over time, the daily repetition of the fast breaks the cycle of eating as entertainment. Food is forcibly returned to its primary utilitarian function.
Which is fueling the biological machine for the day's tasks.
Right. The monks are trained to approach their single morning meal with profound gratitude, recognizing it as the fuel that allows them to practice their spirituality.
But once noon hits,
They must practice detaching from the desire to seek sensory pleasure for the rest of the day. It is a grueling daily psychological exercise in separating a biological need from an emotional want.
it systematically dismantles the habit of recreational eating that requires immense mental fortitude.
It is not easy, but it is necessary for their path.
Okay, so the first pillar is deeply psychological. What is the second pillar supporting this role?
The second pillar is intensely practical and directly impacts the primary occupation of a monk. The texts state that the rule is designed to aid in Dhamma practice.
Aiding in Dhamma practice. How does fasting help with that?
Specifically, the ancient compilers noted that evening eating causes physical drowsiness, which makes deep meditation incredibly difficult, if not impossible.
I love this because the ancient text is literally, formally codifying the biological reality of the food coma.
They observed the biology and built a rule around it.
That's amazing.
Anyone who has ever eaten a massive, heavy dinner, say a huge plate of the cooked rice or meat from the forbidden menu, and then tried to sit down at a desk to do intense, focused, intellectual work, knows exactly what the texts are describing.
Oh, I know that feeling all too well.
The physiological response is undeniable. When you consume a heavy meal, your autonomic nervous system shifts into rest and digest mode.
It shuts you down.
Your body forcefully diverts massive amounts of energy and blood flow away from your brain and muscles, sending it directly to your gastrointestinal tract to process all those dense calories.
Your eyelids get heavy, your brain gets foggy, you feel lethargic, you completely lose your sharp mental edge.
Right. And you have to consider the daily schedule of a Buddhist monk. Their primary responsibility, their job, so to speak, is the rigorous internal mental discipline of meditation and the deep study of the Dhamma.
The teachings of the Buddha.
Yes. In this tradition, the period from sunset deep into the quiet hours of the night is considered prime time for profound meditation.
So if you just ate a huge dinner,
If a monk's body is laboring to digest a massive evening feast, their mind simply cannot achieve the necessary crystalline clarity and intense focus required for that spiritual work.
it's biologically impossible.
By enforcing a strict fast afternoon, the rule guarantees that by the time evening arrives, the monk's digestive system is completely empty. Their body is light, unburdened by digestion, and their mind is primed for peak spiritual performance.
So pillar 2 is essentially a biohack for spiritual optimization.
You could definitely call it that.
They are aligning their digestive cycles to ensure maximum mental clarity during the most important hours of their day. Now, let's move to pillar 3. When I was first reviewing the source material and the historical context for this deep dive, this was the pillar that completely blew my mind.
It's a fascinating one.
It really shifts the focus from the internal world of the monk entirely to the external world of the society around them. What is the third reason for the rule?
Pillar 3 is reducing the burden on the villagers.
Reducing the burden on the villagers.
The texts explain that because the monastic community relies entirely on the ancient practice of almsgathering, meaning the monks must physically walk through the community and beg for their daily food, restricting their meals to a single morning window, drastically limits the number of times the local villagers are required to prepare and offer food.
I want to spend a significant amount of time unpacking the math and the logistics of this because this is an absolute masterpiece of ancient socioeconomic design.
The logistics are staggering when you really think about it.
We have to visualize the reality of a growing monastic community in a place like ancient Rajagaha. We aren't talking about 5 or 10 guys in a cabin.
No, not at all.
As the movement grew, we are talking about hundreds, eventually thousands of monks living in the vicinity of these urban centers. And as we established earlier, they produce absolutely nothing in terms of agriculture.
They are completely dependent.
Every single grain of rice they consume must be grown, harvested, cooked, and voluntarily donated by a layperson.
It represents a massive, continuous tax on the local agrarian economy, fueled entirely by the goodwill and charity of the working class.
Exactly. Now think about the physical labor required to prepare a meal in 500 BCE.
It wasn't easy.
There are no microwaves, there are no grocery stores. Preparing a meal means a family has to chop firewood, build and tend a fire, haul water, manually grind roasted flour with stones, and cook the food from scratch. It is exhausting, time-consuming labor.
Dear hours.
If the Buddha had allowed his hundreds of monks to wander into the village 3 times a
It
day,
would have been a disaster.
knocking on doors for breakfast, returning for a heavy lunch, and then showing up again at sunset, demanding a hot dinner. And demanding this from people who have been engaged in back-breaking agricultural labor all day just to feed their own children.
The result would be catastrophic.
The goodwill of the populace would evaporate almost instantly.
The economic and physical burden on the village would be entirely unsustainable. The villagers would be bankrupted by the constant demand for calories, or they would become so physically exhausted by the endless cooking that they would grow to deeply resent the monastic community.
They would stop seeing the monks as revered spiritual guides and start seeing them as an invasive species of parasites draining the village's resources.
That's a harsh way to put it, but historically that is exactly what would happen.
But by instituting this strict, unyielding rule, restricting the monks to a single, coordinated morning alms round, the Buddha essentially engineered an ancient sustainability model. He protected the village economy.
The mechanics are brilliant.
How does it play out for the villagers?
The lay people wake up, they start their cooking fires, they prepare the food for the day. As the monks pass by in the early morning, the villagers joyfully offer a portion of their food, and then, crucially, the transaction is over.
That finality is the key.
Once the monks return to the monastery before noon, the villagers are entirely free.
They are free to go out into their fields and work. They know their religious obligations for merit-making are fulfilled for the day.
They don't have to worry about it anymore.
And most importantly, when they come home exhausted at sunset, they are free to cook and eat their own evening meals in absolute peace, knowing with total certainty that a monk is not going to suddenly appear at their door asking for a portion of their dinner.
Right. It ensures that the act of religious giving remains a profound joy rather than a resented, exhausting burden.
It is a profound demonstration of structural empathy. The monastic leadership recognized that their spiritual pursuits were entirely subsidized by the sweat of the working-class laypeople.
They were very self-aware.
By designing a rule that aggressively minimized their impact on the local economy, they ensured the external physical survival of their institution.
And if you look at the synergy of these pillars, it's incredible.
How they work together.
Exactly. Pillar 2, avoiding drowsiness, optimizes the monk's internal solitary spiritual work. But Pillar 3, protecting the villagers' resources, ensures the external societal harmony that makes the monastery possible in the first place. It's a perfectly balanced ecosystem.
It is brilliant civic engineering disguised as a dietary restriction.
It really is.
Okay, bringing it all together, what is the fourth and final pillar supporting this rule?
The fourth pillar serves as the overarching goal of the entire monastic endeavor: building discipline.
Building discipline.
The texts view the fasting rule as a vital daily mechanism for training the monks in the virtues of moderation and patience.
Because discipline isn't an abstract concept you can just declare. It is a muscle that must be continuously exercised.
It requires daily practice.
And voluntarily denying yourself food when you are genuinely hungry, simply because a shadow on a sundial has crossed a specific line, requires an astronomical amount of willpower.
It forces a brutal daily confrontation with baseline biological desire.
Every single day.
Every single afternoon, as the sun gets hot, a monk is going to feel hunger. They are going to remember the taste of a snack. They are going to feel the instinct to seek comfort in food.
But they can't act on it.
The rule dictates that they must sit with that feeling. They must observe the desire rising in their mind, acknowledge the physical sensation of hunger, and then actively choose to let it pass without taking action.
This daily, relentless repetition of restraint builds a formidable psychological resilience.
It is the foundation of their mental training.
The underlying philosophy is that if a person can learn to master their most fundamental, loud, evolutionary drive, the drive to consume calories, they are simultaneously building the internal mental architecture required to master infinitely more complex emotional and spiritual challenges.
You train the mind by mastering the stomach.
When you view all four of these pillars together, reducing the attachment to pleasure, optimizing the biology for meditation, protecting the fragile local economy, and forging an ironclad daily discipline, you realize this is not an arbitrary rule about clocks and rice.
It's the foundation of everything they do.
It is a load-bearing architectural feature of their entire existence.
Absolutely.
Which brings us to the final, and to me, the most mind-boggling aspect of this entire deep dive.
The longevity of it all.
Yes. We have spent this time immersed in the world of ancient Rajagaha, analyzing the mountain festival, the socioeconomics of ancient alms, and the internal logic of the Vinaya Pitaka.
It's been a journey.
But how does a rule, established by one leader in response to a specific group of monks eating leftover festival food, manage to translate into the modern world?
It translates through a level of institutional memory and cultural dedication that is almost difficult for the modern mind to fully grasp.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
Because the reality we have to confront is that this tradition did not die out with the ancient empires. It remains a highly active daily reality today.
As we speak.
As we speak, across the globe, modern monks are waking up before dawn, walking silently through city streets for morning alms, eating their meals before noon, and fasting until the sun rises again, following the exact parameters of the decree issued in Velavana.
Our source material outlines several specific modern nations where this rule is strictly practiced today. Where is this ancient clock still ticking?
The strict observance of this rule is primarily maintained in nations with deep Theravada Buddhist traditions. The texts specifically highlight countries like Thailand, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Laos, and Cambodia.
And it's just a normal part of daily life there.
In these nations, the morning alms round is not some historical reenactment. It is a vibrant, central, and daily pillar of national life.
I really want to emphasize the sheer, staggering scale of time we were discussing here. 2.5 millennia, 2,500 years.
It's an immense amount of time.
I want you, the listener, to try and imagine any rule, any civic law, or any corporate policy that we institute today surviving exactly as it was written down to the specific exceptions for honey and butter across multiple sovereign countries, across massive tectonic shifts in human history.
Surviving the rise and fall of empires.
The invention of electricity, the Industrial Revolution, the internet, surviving intact for the next 2,500 years. It feels almost impossible.
It highlights the profound power of the Tipitaka, not just as a religious text, but as a vehicle for indestructible institutional memory.
It's not just a book to them.
No. The fidelity of this fasting rule hasn't been maintained by mere accident or casual habit. It has been maintained through the obsessive, meticulous preservation of these texts by dedicated scholars and monks over centuries.
Which is exactly why we made sure to highlight our sources at the beginning of this deep dive.
The sourcing is everything here.
The fact that modern universities in Thailand, like Mahachulalongkorn Vidyalaya and Mahamakut, alongside international academic groups like the Pali Text Society, are still studying, translating, and referencing the exact same legal code.
Pasipia 37.
Yes, Pasitya 37. And repeating the exact same Pali phrasing that the Buddha utilized in ancient Rajagaha, it demonstrates a level of cultural preservation that defies logic.
It shows a profound respect for the Vinaya Pitaka, not as a dead historical artifact to be studied behind glass, but as a living, breathing constitution.
It still governs them today.
The modern monks navigating the traffic in Bangkok or walking the streets of Colombo or Yangon view themselves as being bound by the exact same philosophical and practical logic that bound the monks in the ancient bamboo grove.
They are still consciously protecting the faith of the modern laypeople who offer them food.
They are still avoiding evening drowsiness to maintain their meditation practices in a hyper-distracted modern world.
They're still actively working to reduce the economic burden on modern society.
And they're still using that afternoon hunger to build internal discipline.
It is a living, breathing bridge across thousands of years of human history. And when you trace that massive, global, unbroken chain of human behavior all the way back to its very first link, you don't find a sterile boardroom.
You find a very human mistake.
You find 17 guys who brought too much takeout back to the dorms and woke up the wrong people.
It is the perfect reminder that the most profound, enduring systems of human discipline often arise from the most ordinary, relatable human mistakes.
So let's briefly recap the massive journey we've taken today. We started in the bustling streets of ancient Rajagaha with an enthusiastic, loud, perfumed mountain festival that got slightly out of hand.
We saw how the unchecked generosity of the villagers created a crisis of monastic discipline.
We saw a leader, Gautama Buddha, forced to act not just as a mystical guide, but as a highly pragmatic public relations manager.
Recognizing that his entire community relied on the goodwill of the public, he prioritized the optics of faith.
He instituted a perfectly balanced legal system, a strict fasting clock starting at noon, paired with compassionate medical exceptions for rapid energy sustenance.
And we unpacked the brilliant architecture supporting that rule.
4 pillars meticulously designed to sever the addiction to the pleasure of taste, optimize the biological machinery for deep meditation, protect the local agrarian economy from exhaustion, and forge an ironclad daily discipline.
An entirely logical socioeconomic masterpiece of a rule.
One that is still thriving and governing the lives of millions across Southeast Asia today. We've seen how carefully engineered this ancient rule was to reduce the burden on society, to foster intense internal clarity, and to ensure harmony between the spiritual seekers and the working-class villagers supporting them.
It's a system designed for balance.
So I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day. I want you to look at the habits, the routines, and the unwritten rules that we are establishing in our modern, hyper-connected society right now.
The rules we live by today.
Look at our modern digital diets, where we are constantly consuming endless streams of information at all hours of the day and night.
Look at our actual physical diets, characterized by constant grazing access to hyper-palatable foods.
And look at our relentless, always-on, 2047 work culture that demands constant availability. Ask yourself, are the rules of our modern life designed to build internal discipline, cultivate mental clarity, and promote social harmony?
Or are they doing the opposite?
Exactly. Or are the systems we live in today inadvertently designed to maximize our attachments, completely destroy our internal focus, and ultimately exhaust the villagers around us?